So here we are at the sanding phase of the project. To date we have put almost 3 cans of the Wadco clear lacquer. There's maybe half a can left, which I'm just keeping for emergencies in case there's some touch-ups that I need to make after the sanding process. As you can see so far, the body as is has not been sanded, it's just been clear coated. And I have to say the Wadco clear lacquer really goes on nice. As you can see, I'll try and catch some light. It's actually pretty darn smooth. It's shiny and we haven't even sanded it yet. Here's the back of it. So I think it came out really nice. Here, a shot of the sides, pretty glossy. The grain really came out nice, and it really sparkles and reflects under sunlight. So I'm hoping that I don't mess it up during the sanding phase. Now, what I've learned so far is when you're applying the lacquer, apply it very lightly. Try not to overdo it, and that will avoid any kinds of drips that you'll have to fix later. You can apply the lacquer relatively frequently, like within half an hour of layers. But if you apply the lacquer and then wait more than 6 hours, then it's a good idea to lightly sand the body before applying the next layer of lacquer so that the lacquer can adhere to the previous layer. What else can I say? If you're going to be going over the body, I would say try to shoot extra lacquer on the edges of the body because those tend to sand through really quickly. And when you're sanding, try to avoid the edges so that you don't accidentally sand through. I'm going to be starting with a 1000 grit sandpaper, and you can actually start at a lower grit like an 800. But I don't happen to have any 800 on hand. So I'm going to be using 1000 grit, and I'll pick up some 800 later on. This is wet dry sandpaper, meaning you can sand it dry or wet. I'm going to be sanding it wet, which means I filled up a little spray bottle with some water and a couple of drops of dish soap. I'm going to spray down the area that I'm going to be working in, and then I'm going to wrap the sandpaper around a little foam block, like a high density foam block that I had. This is just a block that you get from packaging, but it's pretty thick. So I'm going to wrap it around there. I'm going to just take it, this is not the same grid, but I'm just showing you. I'm going to wrap it around nice and tight so that there's no folds. You want to keep this flat as possible, and then after spraying it down with water, just gently go back and forth. And I'm not going to be pressing down extremely hard. You want the sandpaper to do the work, and that'll create kind of a little slurry that you'll want to dry off. And I'll probably just use some regular towel, work towels to dry it off. And check your work frequently. The goal here is to get the body to lose its shine. You want it to be uniformly matte, and what we're aiming for is basically to mat it down to 1000 grit, then remove those scratches with 1500 grit, and then remove those scratches with 2000 grit, and then eventually buff it above 2000 with a buffer wheel and some buffing compound. And at that point we should have a pretty glossy, hopefully mirror-like shine to the guitar. So let's get started on that. So you know you have to stop the sanding process when the cloudiness becomes uniform. Right now you can still see that there's some shiny spots and then some cloudy spots. You want it all to be cloudy without going too far. You don't want to cut through the finish. You just want to level sand the top. Once it's all the same uniform cloudiness, then we can go to the next grit and try to start buffing the shine back in. So I'm going to continue doing that, and we'll take a look at it once I'm done. Okay, so at this point I just wanted to show you what wet sanding with 1000 grit sandpaper and then polishing by hand just using a regular roll of towels, and I just wrapped it with a little sponge like so, and then I just used some Meguiar's Scratch X 2.0. It's a fine scratch and blemish remover, and I just rubbed it out by hand, and this is the result that I have so far. So as you can see with the reflection of the light, it's pretty good already. So the back of it. Now the back of it has a little bit more dimples in it because the actual grain of the alder is a little bit more porous, and I didn't seal it before I actually applied the lacquer. So what I'm gonna see now is whether or not I can get more of it, the scratches out with a 2000 grit, and I'm just gonna go over it with a 2000 grit, see what happens. And if I still see that there's still little dimples, what I might do is spray one last coat of lacquer on this just to try and fill up the little grains in the back. Of course, the walnut here is still going to be rough. You can see the walnut, the grains is very visible in the walnut, but I kind of like that. So I want that to stay. But the rest of it is pretty good so far. So more sanding to be done. The process itself, I'd say you're going to be sanding for at least an hour or two. So get ready for that. And once you're at this level of glossiness, you might actually decide to stop there. A lot of people might be happy with that, but I want to go one step further. So let's do that. See what happens. Alright guys, so right now you can see the gloss that I've ended up with after quite a bit of wet sanding and buffing and polishing. So originally I had some little divots in the paint, and I pretty much buffed out the majority of those, which I thought maybe I might have to spray one last coat of lacquer to cover them up. But you know what, you can see the reflection of the light in the top, and it's quite good. So I don't think I need to do that. And see, the edges turned out quite nice. So basically this end result was a combination of things. I started off with 1000 grit sandpaper, and I wet sanded the guitar to start with. Thinking back, I probably should have started with 800, but I didn't have 800, so I skipped that step and I went straight to 1000, and then I jumped all the way to 2000. And I would recommend, if anybody's planning on doing this, to go 800, 1000, 1500, and 2000. That would probably make it a lot easier on the buffing. Now what I did at the end when I finished sanding with the 2000 grit, I also applied some Meguiar's Scratch X 2.0, which is here. And I just basically liberally applied that to the body and used a buffing wheel on a drill that I purchased. And this is like I guess a $12, $13 buffing wheel, nothing too expensive. It's actually pretty cheap. And I just basically buffed in the Scratch X, and I removed the majority of the scratches, but it also will leave a hue on it once it dries. So to get rid of that, I followed that up with some guitar polish, and I just basically polished that up with this. This is some guitar polish I had lying around, which is actually quite good. I got this from Guitar West in sandalwood
in California. There's the number if you want to get in touch with them. They're guitarswest.net, and you can email them at gary@guitarwest.net. It's quite a good product actually, and it actually removed the remainder of the Scratch X, and I just use a cloth, just a standard cloth like this, and I buffed it by hand. And it takes quite a bit of elbow grease. You can expect to be buffing there for a couple of hours to be able to get a mirror finish like this, but I'm quite happy with the final result. It really came out outstanding, and considering this is my first guitar stain and lacquer project with spray cans and leather tint, I'm really happy with the final result. I can't wait to finish putting this guitar together with all the parts and the neck and hardware and everything. So the next step in the process would be just to let the lacquer set and cure. Although the can says 30 minutes between coats, and you can handle it after 30 minutes, I would strongly recommend anyone trying to do this to let the lacquer cure for, I'd say, a week to 2 weeks for it to achieve maximum hardness. In that time, I will order the parts that I need for the guitar project, and I will, eventually come back to it and start putting it together. And I can't wait for the final project to be done, and I can't wait to hear what this thing sounds like once it's finished. It really does look gorgeous. So if you guys are interested in seeing the project all the way through, stay tuned, because I will be posting other videos of the process once I start the actual build. I've decided to go with chrome hardware as opposed to gold. I mentioned gold in the beginning video that I shot. I think chrome would also look very, very good. I'm hoping to get a rosewood neck for it, and going to be looking and scouring eBay for some deals on that, and hopefully within the next few weeks should be able to put the rest of this thing together, and I'll throw up some videos on that as well for anyone interested in building their own guitar. Stay tuned.